Hey, so it's our 1 month anniversary already. So, what'd you get me? Chocolates? Flowers? A diamond ring? Wait, you can tell me later. I want to show you what I got you first. It's a review of the PS1 game, Driver, You Are The Wheelman. Let me tell you a bit about it, then you can try it on and see if it fits you. Driver was initially released on June 30th, 1999 in North America, but it was later ported to many other systems, including the Game Boy Color, PC, and there was even a remastered version for iOS devices.
Need you to make an exchange. This case for a locker key. It's a sweet deal. Cash for a key. In and out. Wham, bam, boom. Meet them at the marina. Get the key or stay out of town.
Driver takes a lot of its style from 70s car chases and action crime drama-esque movies, which is evident by all of the jive turkeys and such thrown around. Hey, does anyone even know what a jive turkey is? At the time, Driver did one thing that was extremely unique and would eventually become a staple of gaming in general: open world driving. While Driver wasn't the first game to do this, it was easily one of the more prominent ones until Grand Theft Auto 3 stole it from right out under their noses. Story-wise, the game is kind of a complicated mess. The premise itself is pretty simple. You're an undercover cop named John Tanner. You're a skilled driver, so the NYPD tasks you with infiltrating crime rings and bringing them down from the inside by doing jobs for said crime bosses. Beyond that, though, it quickly becomes a mess. The plot naturally has you driving around New York, performing tasks given to you by your superiors in the crime rings, but not before first going all the way to Miami, San Francisco, and Los Angeles to fix their damned problems too. Why? Who knows? Driver breaks itself down into several modes on the main menu, some more relevant than others. Undercover mode is where the story lies. Car chases allows you to view saved replays, which I'll go into further later. Training is exactly what it says it is, as is the cheats menu. Driving games is a collection of arcade-style minigames that are often laughably ruthless in difficulty. Take a Ride is probably the mode that most people spent their time in. I know I did when I was a little kid. It's effectively free roam mode. Then there's options and high scores. Since most of the modes are derivative of the story mode, that's where we'll be spending most of our time during this review. Undercover mode begins with a tutorial mission that was infamous at the time of release, at least with the younger section of the audience. Back then, most kids my age couldn't even begin to fathom what a slalom was, let alone what exactly we were supposed to do based on the rest of the single-word descriptions for the techniques we were performing. And few of us had the internet to help solve our problems anyway. It's a pretty great concept for a tutorial because it wraps into the story by claiming that this is Tanner's initiation test to prove that he's worthy of hiring in the criminal underworld. But without describing what any of the required tasks are, many players are left in the dark until they stumble upon a solution. Once you get past this, however, the game becomes extraordinarily simple. Driver basically tasks the player with driving from point A to point B, and sometimes from B to C, C to D, etc. There are a few missions that are unique in design, like the ones where you're tasked with tailing someone without them knowing, or the ones where your goal is to trash an enemy car, among others, but mainly you'll just be driving and avoiding the police. Your car has a damage meter, which when filled renders your car unusable. Pretty standard. Below that is a felony meter. The higher that gets, the more ruthless the cops get in their chase, and these police don't mess around. Their entire goal is to destroy your vehicle, and they aren't going to give you the chance to pull over and surrender. You escape their grasp by getting far enough ahead that they lose you. Beyond the regular driving controls, the player also has a button dedicated to doing burnouts at low speeds. Other than that, the game is pretty standard by today's standards. This really goes to show just how much the modern crime game takes from Driver, Grand Theft Auto post to GTA 3 included. Driver's physics were rather fantastic for the time, with a realistic weight to the cars creating cinematic drifts around corners and many heart-pounding close calls with oncoming traffic. Tires lose traction in a way that makes sense for the most part, and you can really feel the power pulling the car forward when you step on the gas, especially when you use the burnout button. The camera works well for what it's worth, and does a really good job of staying out of your way while playing. Players who aren't used to this console generation might find it hard to get used to the L and R buttons to look around, but it generally does what you need when you need it to. The AI of the other cars is a bit hit or miss, however. The actions of the police when in pursuit are both thrilling and unforgiving, which serves to keep a game action-packed. But they can sometimes be a little too ruthless. They can often spawn at the worst times or in the worst places, and some missions end with your car being repeatedly smashed into a wall with no real escape in sight. Or a light pole. Or a power line. Yeah, Driver's one of those games where the city is held together by the will of the gods. One trick to use in slow areas with police in pursuit is to stop and reverse into them slowly. The game seems to register damage each frame of animation, and since the front of the car where the engine is takes damage faster than the rear, you tend to take minimal damage while the police cars are destroyed extremely quickly. If you're skilled enough, you can also trade a little bit of paint with civilian cars. This usually causes the police to crash violently into them. I'm not exactly sure why, but it works. Most missions are built well, though there are a few missions that end up being absolute hell, 3 of which had me stuck for more than an hour each. If you have the space, be sure to save a backup file. You see, Driver allows you to choose from a multitude of missions, many of which can be skipped. It provides branching paths of sorts through the story, though they all have the same outcomes really. However, you can never be 100% positive before completing a mission that it won't force you to finish a string of them afterward. You might be stuck doing several missions before your choices open up again. This means it's very possible to end up in the position I was in a few times, where the mission you're in is too difficult, but it's the only one you can choose. In this situation, the only options are to beat your head against the wall until you come out on top, or reload an earlier save if you're lucky enough to have one. Or start from the beginning of the game. The missions, the briefcase, and rite of passage are among the worst when it comes to poor balance, as is the final mission in the game. Each of these took me well over an hour to complete, which wasn't exactly what I'd call fun. Besides the police AI just being too much on these missions, other problems plague them as well. The civilian vehicle AI is generally okay, but watch yourself in large intersections. 9 times out of 10, they won't stop if they see you speeding by. Given the way that the physics system is built, even just a tap can send your car flying into a wall at full speed. Another issue is that the timer on some missions is questionably set. Most missions leave you with only a certain amount of time to get to each objective. Some of them leave you with far too little, meaning that it may come down to memorization, perfect execution, and a little bit of luck. Sometimes a lot of luck. The final mission in the game is the poster child for undercooked design, with the police cars suddenly getting massive speed upgrades, the whole precinct being on full alert from very early on, a tough timer, and a long road ahead, traffic everywhere, and a player car that's insanely slow and corners like a farm truck. I understand developers like making the climax difficult, but this does nothing to actually test your skills. Instead, it's almost entirely based on chance. Most missions, as I've said, are much better built though, largely through the way the game is structured. Going the speed limit, stopping at stoplights, and generally obeying traffic laws will keep you hidden from the police as long as you haven't already caught police attention once before. The player also has each of the 4 cities entirely open for them to route through. The game gives you a starting position and a destination, and really leaves the rest up to you. Obviously, the traffic is largely randomized too. These options give the game a sense of freedom that's wholly unique and fun to explore. On top of this, there are races outside of the story mode that can be played both in the city and on dirt tracks, as well as isolated versions of mission structures, like evading police or chasing down an opposing vehicle. The frame rate is stable most of the time, though it does dive every once in a while. Police do seem to have an effect on that, but the dropped frames generally seem to be more based on the area of the map you're in rather than the traffic or anything like that. There's unfortunately one major issue though, that ends up arguably ruining the entire experience from the get-go. While the physics are fun to play around with, the steering control is absolutely broken. I didn't seem to ever have a problem with it for the countless hours I played this game when I was a kid, but this playthrough left me frustrated almost the entire way through. 15 minutes in, I was already practically begging for the end to come. The problem is in the fact that there is no analog control option in this game. I can hear many of you who've played the game typing away already, informing me that the analog stick can indeed be used while playing. but that's not what I'm referring to. It's true that the player can play using the left stick to steer. However, it controls the car in a binary fashion just like the D-pad does. You're either not steering at all, or you've got the wheel turned to the absolute maximum. There is no in-between, hence no true analog control. This means that oftentimes your car veers off to one side, losing all control and spinning out simply when trying to slalom between traffic. The game attempts to buffer this issue by limiting the amount the car can steer until you've held the direction down for a second or so, but that can sometimes lead to the car not turning enough. In practice, this leads to you having to fight with the controls every time a small movement is required, and the controls feeling slow to react when you're trying to make large adjustments. Precision doesn't really exist here, meaning you'll constantly be fighting to get the car to go where you need it to. And good luck not spinning out if you try to take a corner at any speed fast enough for the tires to break loose. It's a shame, because this is a problem that could have easily been fixed. In fact, I turned on Driver 2 just a few days after I captured the footage for this review, and I found that they'd fixed the problem in the very next game. It's amazing how a single decision can have such a huge impact later down the line. But back then, we were used to these sort of controls, and in most games, it's not that big of an issue even today. But when combined with the physics engine specific to Driver, that factor alone made the game nearly unplayably frustrating for me. It may be different for others, but I couldn't stand it. Maybe it's because I spend a lot of time playing driving games of both the arcade and simulation variety. Maybe modern day precision has just spoiled me. But when other games of the time were doing things so much better, it's not really excusable. The story mainly plays out through brief cutscenes and the phone messages used to give you your missions. However, it's incredibly difficult to follow what's going on, and most people probably won't care beyond the first hour or so anyway. I would give a synopsis, but it's honestly not really worth it. You could tell that the development team wished there was more disk space and more time, with many phone conversations starting in a pre-rendered cutscene format, but reverting to a still frame when the conversation actually ensues.
Talk.
Those punks, Stan just a couple of lowlights who got lucky and tagged me for a meal ticket, man. Figured I knew something you was gonna increase some bills for. You know what I'm saying? I guess I was their ace, and they played me, man.
The voice acting is laughably campy, though I'm not ready to dock the game for that, as it very well could have been intentional. I found a lot of the cutscenes incredibly hard to watch though, as many of them are extremely dark, likely as a way to hide the lack of detail within them. It's really difficult to tell who's who in each scene, until something quote-unquote interesting happens. The audio thankfully fares much better, with excellent music and full sounding effects. The cars give you a proper sense of power. Police sirens are a bit obnoxious, but in what game are they not? The music, meanwhile, feels really in tune with what's going on, and gives you a nice feeling of cohesiveness. It really does a great job of capturing the old-school crime flick feel. Graphically, the game is about what you'd expect for the PS1. For the time, it had some rather nice reflections on the cars, and nice little touches like the hubcaps falling off on your car as you drive, though I could never get all 4 of them to fall off for some reason. Anyway, there's a decent amount of variation in both environments and in cars, leading to a game that really feels like it's progressing as you play. I found it difficult to get bored of the look of the game. The draw distance doesn't fare quite as well, though it rarely gets in the way while you're playing as long as you pay attention to the map. One big issue is with the replay system of the game, which becomes readily apparent once you spend a bit of time with it. You see, Sony brand PS1 memory cards used flash memory to store things, just like a flash drive or a solid-state drive does. However, flash memory back then was incredibly expensive, leading to the amount of space you got from a memory card being only 120 kilobytes split up into 15 8-kilobyte blocks. That's not a lot of space, and a whole memory card wouldn't even be able to get close to storing a single minute of video without being compressed to the point of it being unviewable. Therefore, the solution Driver used was to only store player input data and recreate the replay on the fly. The problem is that this didn't store traffic data, so oftentimes traffic will appear in the replay that wasn't in the original, causing your car to smash into traffic or cops that weren't there when you played before. When I was a kid, I once spent several hours coming up with the perfect car chase and practicing it until I nailed the entire run. I saved the replay and waited patiently until the next day when I could show it to all my friends. Unfortunately, every time I started the replay for them, the car would never get completely through the run before it would hit a random NPC car that shouldn't have been there. So while an interesting concept that has worked before, see every Gran Turismo game, this feature just couldn't work on the hardware it was trying to function on. Driver, you are the wheelman, is considered the progenitor of the modern open-world driving game. It indeed set many of the bars that were used on later games. GTA is so prominent now that people almost forget the huge fan wars that went on between Grand Theft Auto fans and Driver fans back after GTA 3 arrived. It also didn't help that Driver 3 felt years behind when it finally arrived, though it still had some interesting pieces. Too bad that the series spent so long playing catch-up, to the point that even better games like Driver San Francisco were largely overlooked. If you still have a PS3 or 360, you should definitely look into that game. It's pretty fun and unique. Anyway, back to Driver 1. This game stumbles a lot. It's a really hard game that's probably difficult to enjoy today, largely thanks to the poor control. But if you pretend it's a party game, you might be able to have lots of fun with the various extra modes, especially when cheats are enabled. Especially if you have a Game Shark. The Stilts cheat is amazing with a Game Shark, just saying. So, now that you have your 1-month anniversary present, what'd you get me? Nothing? You got me nothing. You know what? It's fine. I know what you can do. If you want to make it up to me, then you can press those like and subscribe buttons. You know I love you, and I always will. To know that you like me is all that I need. That, and I need them subs, dog!